No. Good. Now, she doesn't have any problems with driving.
All right, well, people are going to keep meandering in, so I just thought I'd kind of maybe just get started. Just a quick overview. I'm Scott. If you've ever called 8580, there's an even money shot you've got me. If not, if you got the answer right, you probably got Pearly. So I'm just giving you an idea of who I am. I work out in Westbrook. If you ever call 8580, feel free, introduce yourself to me, and hopefully you'll remember this. Today, this is going to be a class that's exclusively focused. It's a 30-minute class on Excel and some of the more kind of reverse engineering, if you will, of the features you can do with it. For example, we used to call this sensitivity analysis. Like, okay, so if I want to get a 3% rate of return, what are my numbers going to look like versus a 5%? What if my costs go up? So you would be measuring that, these tiny little changes in how they would alter your outcome. So Excel came up with a set of really fantastic features which allow you to approach problem solving with the end in mind, if that makes sense. But before we get started on the really cool stuff, I just want to go over a fundamental function that maybe you've seen, maybe you've used. It's the if function. It's really kind of the genesis of a lot of different things that you can do within Excel. The if function basically just says, if a condition is true, what am I supposed to do? And if it's not true, what do you want me to do? So the if function starts with equal, and then the word if, and then an open parenthesis. All functions in Excel start with an equal sign. The moment you start with an equal sign, Excel immediately stops thinking, okay, you can type anything you want into this cell to, okay, there's a specific set of instructions I have to do, right? So equal if. So here's a great example of what I have up here. I just need a yes or no answer if I worked overtime in a given week. So what are the rules of overtime? I don't want to know how much overtime I made. I just want to know if I made overtime. And if I did, I want the word yes to appear. And if I didn't, I want the word no to appear. So inside my spreadsheet here, you've got column B5, and that is how many hours John worked that week. Now, John worked 33 hours. What's the criteria we need for overtime? Over 40. If it's more than 40, not if it's more than or equal to, but if it's more than 40, right? If it's more than 40, then I want this word to say yes. If it's less, then I want it to say no. So let's go ahead and construct that. Just go in here and delete. I can either type the word equal or I can hit this little cool button up here. Does everybody see this little f of x, the function button? If you hit that, it'll take you to a list of, oh, these are pretty common functions. So it'll just save you a step. I said, yeah, I'm working on the if function. Come down to if. And logic test. That's just saying, if it's true, what do you want me to do? So what cell is my condition? It's this cell, right? If this cell is more than 40, so the true statement, if it is more than 40, I want it to say yes. So I'm going to put the word yes when I'm doing it in quotes. That way Excel knows it's not thinking it's a named range or something messed up. And if it's not true, I'm going to type in the word no. And if I hit OK, so 33 is less than 40. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do 41 hours. Hey, my condition worked, just like magic. That's how the if function works. So what if I actually wanted to calculate the overtime? Well, let's go to the next sheet and talk about that for a minute. Okay. You make $15 an hour. The hours you worked are 40. Let me delete this so you don't see the answer. If it weren't for overtime, it would be a really easy equation to calculate how much I made, right? It would just be my hourly rate times my hours worked. Boom, there's my salary, and I'm done. But overtime kind of throws a curveball in there, doesn't it? Because 40 hours is just 40 times 15. But 41 hours, how do I calculate that? So I'm still gonna have the 40 times 15 for that, but then how do I calculate overtime? Just verbally tell me. You don't have to look at a number. Like precisely. So you multiply that by 1.5, and then you add it back to the rest of the hours worked, right? So in this case, so say I worked 50 hours, I would do 40 times 15. That's my base. And then what would I add to it? I would add the 50 minus 40, so I'm adding 10 times what? One and a half times my rate, and we're adding it back to 40 times that. Does that make sense? So let's go ahead. We're going to write that formula. We're going to pull up their f of x. We're going to hit good old if. And let's go with the logical test. So if hours worked, which is this cell, is less than 40. So if it's less than, let's do less than or equal to, just to make it easier for ourselves. Less than or equal to 40. That's an easy one. How do I calculate that? What am I multiplying?
Multiply the rate by the hours worked.
Precisely, exactly. So that's going to be F6 times G6, right?
Yep.
Great. It gets fun when we have to say, wait a minute, what if it's not that? So let's talk about, let's build up. Pretend it's 50 hours, right? So the first thing we want to do is calculate how many hours of overtime we worked. So the number of hours we worked is going to be this number minus what? 40, precisely, right? So I'm going to use parentheses in here. All right, so that's 3 hours of overtime. We're just pulling that out. 3 hours of overtime. Now what do I multiply that 3 by?
The hourly rate times 1.5.
1.5 times my rate, right? What does that give me? Just my overtime pay. So what do I have to add back to it? I have to add back 40 hours of work times my hourly rate. Make sense? Now, why am I going through all this? Why did I do this? Well, we have a scenario here. Your car's radiator just exploded. And you need to come up with $875 this week in order to pay the radiator and make rent. So we've got kind of a reverse engineer. How many hours do I have to work before I get the lovely phone call from a bill collector? So we're trying to reverse engineer this. If it weren't for that blasted overtime formula, it would be easy. I would just basically say, oh, okay. Well, I know I need to make $875, so I'm just going to divide the hourly rate by the work. They'll give me the hourly rate, and I'll figure it out from there. But that overtime throws us for a curveball. So that's where you have this really awesome formula called the goal seek. So we have a goal. What is our goal? We need $875, right? So let's go ahead and check it out. Goal seek can be found. You'll have to forgive me. I'm looking at a very odd place. Forgive me on this one. Who's in the first spot in the first place? Under what if is what it's called. So let me find. You know, it's going to be easier if I just look at it this way. I apologize for this real quick. What if analysis? There it is. It's under data. My apologies. Okay. So what if? We're going to set a goal. Here's our goal, right? We need to set our salary to $875 in order to make everything work. So the cell is H6. $875 is what we have. We can't change our hourly rate, which would be awesome if we could. But we can change our hours worked. So the only cell it's going to change is the hours worked. And if I hit OK, it says we need to work 52.2 hours in order to get our car fixed and make rent. We didn't do any formulas for that. Excel did a whole bunch of what ifs until it arrived there and got there. So let me just show that to you one more time. We already have the formula to derive our salary calculated, but I need to figure it out again one last time. So we're going to go into what if, goal seek. Our salary is what we're trying to figure out. We need our salary to be equal to $875. And I can only change one cell, and the only cell I really can change is by hours worked. Change that down here. I hit OK. Once again, it comes up exactly the same. So if I can get 12.2 more hours this week, I can make rent. I have nothing to worry about. Does that make sense? Great. How many many people have had to buy a car or a house recently? Or ever, for that matter. There we go. When you go into a dealership, one of my favorite questions they ask you is,
How much do you wanna spend a month?
exactly. They don't ask you what you can afford. They say, how much can you spend a month? And they've totally changed the conversation from that point. If you, before going into the dealership, realize, I can afford $400 a month for my car. I just don't know how much car that is. You're going to have a little bit more control over the conversation. The guy says, oh yeah, I can get you into a Mercedes for $300 a month. And then you find out you're in a 10-year balloon payment plan. It's just going to kill you. So basically, we're going to do this a little differently. We're going to pretend we're going to buy a house. And you know, after working with your spouse, your lovely, lovely spouse who pays all the bills, she's told you that we can only afford $900 a month, no matter what. That's the best house we can buy is $900 a month. Okay, so we're going to do a little reverse engineering here. So before we do that, I want to introduce everyone to the coolest function in Excel. It's called the PMT, the payment function. This will let you calculate monthly or annual payments on any kind of financial transaction. So you want to buy a car, 5 years, 5%, what are my monthly payments? Payment function will tell you. It's a really cool function. We're going to go over it real quick, but you know what? Before I do that, I want to show you something even cooler than the payment function. The payment function is only going to take your monthly interest rate, your total monthly payments, and the principal. When I say principal, what am I talking about? The loan, exactly. When I'm talking total monthly payments, am I talking about 360 if it's a 30-year, or am I talking 60 if it's a 5-year, that kind of a thing? And the interest rate is just irate. I don't like cells. I don't like calling that F9 or G9 or H9. I really don't like doing that. I would rather label those cells so it's going to be easier for me to read this later on. So, for example, right here I have a mortgage. Does everybody see that? That is cell F8, and I can tell it's F8 because I see this little drop down right here. But I'm going to call it mortgage. I just label a cell. And interest rate, 5%. I don't like F9. I'm just going to call it high rate. Sounds like a Mac product, doesn't it? And term, we're just going to call it term. This is going to make my life so much better. So I'm going to go to my payment. How do I calculate my payment? Well, let's go over our good buddy f of x. And I'll bet payment is probably in here because everybody uses it. It's so cool. There it is on the bottom. Okay. And the rate. Now keep in mind, I am calculating monthly payments. Why do I say it like that? Because every number you feed this has to be in terms of months. You have an annual interest rate of 5% up there. That does you no good. What do you have to do to that number? Divide it by 12. That's extremely important. You have a 30-year mortgage. That does you no good. What do you have to do to that number? Not divide it. How many months? We're all talking months. So it's multiply it by 12, 360. So I just want to gear you up for that, okay? So the rate, and I labeled that irate, didn't I? So I'm just going to type irate. Check it out. I just typed in irate, and it knows what I'm talking about. Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. All right. So I said that's an annual interest rate. We're calculating monthly payments. So what do? I have to divide it by 12. Okay? End period. That is going to be, I think we call that term, right? Yes, it is, because when I typed in term, look what it said. That equals 30. Great. What do I have to do to that guy? Because I need monthly, that's 30 is years. How many months is that? What do I have to do? I've got to multiply it by 12. Does that make sense? Because this is where mistakes get made on functions like this. When you're dealing with financial functions, it's so easy to leave out the normalizer. Am I talking annual, or am I talking monthly, or am I talking weekly? And the PV is the present value. I think I just called that mortgage, didn't I? If I spell it wrong, and I know I spelled it right. Why? Because it immediately said, oh yeah, that's 20,000. Everybody see how I did that? So now if I hit OK, now I want to multiply that by -1 because it's a payment, it comes out as negative. So I'm gonna multiply by -1 because I don't wanna see a negative number there. Make sense? That's cool. And what's even more cool, look at the formula. I rate divided by 12, comma, term times 12, comma, mortgage. You don't see the cell addresses, it's easier to work with. Okay, so this gives me a good baseline. So I know that that's what I'm gonna pay right now. That's not what I need though. I need to break this down. But you know what? I'm gonna save this right now as a scenario. This will be called my baseline. So we're talking about scenarios because we want to basically start saying, what are my options? I want to be able to save various kind of snapshots as I'm doing this so that as I change a variable, I want to be able to roll back very quickly and see what that is. That's a really cool feature called Scenario Manager. So this scenario is our baseline, right? So let's go over what if, and we'll go to Scenario Manager. And we're going to create a new scenario. We'll call it 200K mortgage, 5%, 30 years. And what cells are we changing to make this happen? We are changing these 3 cells. Okay? And hit OK. And hit OK. Why is that cool? Because as I change this, I can roll back to this scenario. And there's some cooler stuff you can do later on, just bear with me. All right, so now, I need it to be $900 a month. What do I have to do? What do I have the ability to do? Let's say I can't do any better than 5%. I'm going to use my goal seek to say what's the maximum mortgage I can afford if I'm stuck at $900 a month. Does that make sense? We just did this in the other example, so where am I going? What if? Goal seek. Everybody see that? So our goal is to set this cell to $900. And let's change the mortgage. That's an easy one, right? Cool. That's so cool. I just found out exactly that I can afford only a $167,000 mortgage at those rates. Let's save this as a scenario so we can kind of create a stack of cards to describe what they are. So we'll go to what if, Scenario Manager, we're going to add, and we'll call this 167K, 5%, 30 years. And I hit OK. And I hit OK. Great. 2 different scenarios up there. Does everybody see that? Close. But your spouse really loved this one house that required a $200,000 mortgage, which is her way of saying we're getting it. So what do we have to do to work backwards from there? Well, I can't control the house. If we're getting a $200,000 house, maybe I can do something with that interest rate. So let's go back up in here. Change this back to 200,000. Cool. Now, let's go back into Goal Seek. And we're going to set the payment to what? 900, right? And that's the only sum I'm going to change this time is the interest rate, right? Hit OK. That's cool. I can buy the dream house. I just have to get 3.52%. What's really cool about that is you can pay points to get that interest rate down. So now you know, going forward, if the interest rate I'm qualifying for is 5%, I can pay 1.5% of the cost of the mortgage, and I can make this happen. That's cool. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK to that. And I'm going to save this. Into my scenario manager. And this scenario is 200K, 3.52%, and 900 of 30 years. And you hit OK. And you hit close. Now your bank says, look, I'd love to help you with that, but that's just, we can't get that interest rate that low. But we can play a little bit with the term. If you want to have a longer than 30-year mortgage, which, please, dear God, tell me you won't ever do, there are banks that will do that. So let's go ahead. Let's reset everything back. So we're stuck at 5%. 5%, okay? Go back up here to what if, Goal Seek, and we're going to set this cell once again to 900, and this time we're going to do it by changing that. Does everybody agree with what I'm doing right there? Mm-hmm. So if I hit OK to this, beautiful. And in 52.1 years, that house is mine, but I got it at $900 a month. Let's go ahead and save this. And that's a scenario that nobody should ever have. 200K, 5%, 52 months. Okay, so now we've done all these scenarios. What good are they? Well, notice I have the scenario manager right here. Does everybody see that? Say, what was that first one I had again? Well, if I double click on it, it takes me right back so I can see what it looked like. So what's cool is I can go down one at a time and take a look at the different scenarios. That will work. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But there's something really cool. You have the ability to do a summary. And if I do a summary, and I'm not going to do a pivot table, that's a much longer class. But if we do a scenario summary, check this out. Look at that. One really easy to read spreadsheet that has everything exactly the place you want it. It shows you what the first basic, where you were to begin with, and the different variables you have to change to get it to 900 a month. One easy to find location, and it took 2 clicks. The only tricky part about doing it was making sure you use the scenario manager. Any questions about that? Okay. All right. There is one other kind of cool what-if analysis you can do, and it uses something called an array function. I won't go into the details as to what that means, but it will allow you to create a table that will be filled with, what if I want to take a look at, that scenario manager was okay, but it didn't let me see what 3.75% was or 4% was. If I lay out a set of scenarios before I get started, which in this case I want to know, at various interest rates, what will be my payments? At various mortgages, what will be my payments? And at various terms, what will be my payments? Do you see, that's really important to do that step first. Can't stress that enough. Okay. So, we'd like to create a rate table. And I want to create a rate table. Let's do it on interest rates. So I'm going to select the interest rates. Selecting this. And we're going to go to our what-if, and we're going to do a data table. Before I get started, please take note. I am setting this up where all of my data is is basically in one big column. So it's going to be a column input cell, not a row. It would rotate everything 90 degrees if I did it the other way. So what is my columns? What is my interest rate? That is my column input cell. Click on that, and hit OK. Check out what it just did. Oh, that was, you want the magician to give you up his tricks? All right, so the goal was, we wanted to create an interest rate table based on this. And we wanted to basically say, hey, I have all the different interest rates I want. They've already itemized them all right here. So I'm telling Excel, look, go back into this scenario, only change that based on this, and show me what this will become. So I'll do that one more time. Actually, I'll do it a couple more times, but I didn't want to do that many times, so hold on. Okay. The important part is we have to have the payment already calculated, and I have the payment right there. Highlight the range you're working with. What if, data tables, everything's in a column, and the only variable I'm changing is 5%. So when I do that, what's really cool is it's looking at this formula, and it's saying, okay, 5% was where? Okay, so now I know I'm going to look in a table, I'm going to replace every time I saw 5% with one of these. That's really cool. I'm sorry, I think that's neat. So I'll hit OK, and there you go. So let's go ahead and do the mortgage. The exact same thing with the mortgage, but this time, what are we changing? Not the interest rate, but rather mortgage. Exactly, the principal. So we'll go over here. What if, data table, column, and what is it we're changing here? Here we're changing the mortgage. And do the same thing finally. What if analysis, data table, column, what are we changing here? The term. There you go. What I would teach this class, specifically with financial functions, what I would always say after you make a change, after you're dealing with something like that, does it add up in your mind? Before you do anything else, do these numbers make sense? Because, for example, we knew going into this that 30 years was 1073, which it is. Does a mortgage of 1581, which is a little, not quite 50% more than that, make sense for it to be a 15-year? And the answer is yes, I can understand that. That makes sense. The reason I ask you to do that is it's really easy to have one number that's not set up correctly, or you have one small problem. And if that number doesn't look right, trust your gut and go back and deconstruct it, because this is where you can get into trouble, one of those things. But this is how the data table works. You were able to keep your baseline up here, you changed the variables for each of the three settings, and you simply said, okay, I'm going to change interest rate for one, term for the other, and mortgage for the other. And there you have it. Any questions at all? I know I threw a ton at you today, and I do appreciate you showing up. But if you have like one-on-one experience, my goal for today was that you'll be going back and doing your job. You'll be working on a spreadsheet, and something will come up that will make you say, you know, it's telling me this number. What would I have to do to get it to be a different number, to be a number that's more in line with my goal? And that's where I want kind of this trigger to go off in your head. Say, oh yeah, we learned this thing called goal seek. Pick up the phone, give me a shout. Or in the calendar invite that I sent to everybody, the class manual is a part of that. So just go into the calendar invite, open up the attachment and print that out, and you can have that. If you don't have it, I will email it to you. It's a piece of cake. Any questions at all? Well, thank you all very much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.